Hello everyone and welcome to another video. So today marks 20 years since Doctor Who came back in 2005 with Christopher Eccleston's Ninth Doctor and Billie Piper's Rose Tyler. Well, if I've been able to time this right, that is, which, spoiler alert, I haven't. So yeah, apologies that this video is coming out a few days after the anniversary itself, but you know, it's still fairly recent enough, so it's still kind of relevant, I suppose. And so, to celebrate this special occasion, I thought I'd do a What If special looking at two scenarios that relate to that fantastic first series of the revival. The scenarios we'll be taking a look at will be what if Hugh Grant was the Ninth Doctor, and what if the 2005 revival had failed. I have technically already done something very similar with the latter, but that was more focused on what if the Schalke Doctor's adventures had continued. These scenarios have not been written by me, no, they've been instead written by Naughty Orchid 12 and Reece. I want to thank both of them for doing this, and I hope you'll enjoy what they've done. I shall still be narrating these scenarios, but they will obviously be very much from each of their respective writers' perspectives. So please bear that in mind, and please show all your support and give any polite and constructive feedback to Naughty and Reece in the comments. Anyway, without any further ado, let's start off with Naughty's take on what if Hugh Grant was the Ninth Doctor. The year is 1999. Writer Stephen Moffat has created a Doctor Who special made specifically for the Red Nose Day charity telethon in the United Kingdom, and was originally broadcast in 4 parts on BBC One on the 12th of March, under the title Doctor Who and the Curse of Fatal Death, with the castings of Rowan Atkinson, Richard Grant, Jim Broadbent, Hugh Grant, and Joanna Lumley as incarnations of the Doctor. Later, Richard Grant, who plays the alternative 10th Doctor in Fatal Death, appears on the actual show as the main antagonist of the 7th series, The Great Intelligence, as well as performing the voice of an alternate version of the 9th Doctor in an animated webcast serial, Scream of the Schalke. Whilst one Grant got to play the role and assumes to be a sort of semi-canon Doctor, one other Grant turned down the role. Hugh Grant was offered the role of the Doctor but turned the role down, to which he later regretted. In 2007, during an interview with Digital Spy, he said, "I was offered the role of the Doctor a few years back and was highly flattered. The danger with those things is that it's only when you see it on screen that you think, damn, that was good, why did I say no? But then, knowing me, I'd probably make a mess of it." Eventually, Chris Eccleston would have been cast as the Ninth Doctor, and the rest would be history. But what if things were a bit different? What if, in an alternate timeline, Hugh Grant didn't turn it down and played the role again, technically speaking? What if Hugh Grant was the Ninth Doctor? Now, before this scenario starts, I feel like there's actually two ways for Hugh Grant to take up the role, but it all depends on the timing. Option 1. Hugh Grant is the Ninth Doctor. Now, in this alternate timeline, I feel that Hugh would actually accept the role, and since he would only have a cameo in the 2005 film Housewarming, it shouldn't cause much difficulty with the rest of his schedule, although I'd still have him do just the one season. His personality would give off 10th Doctor vibes, and he would just feel way too similar to how Tennant played him, especially based off how Hugh Grant tends to play his roles anyway. He'd still have the grief of the Time Lords being destroyed, but it would be a bit toned down, and he won't be as angry as Eccleston's portrayal. Maybe this is to hide the emotions surrounding what became of the Time War. I feel for his outfit, he could wear his outfit he wore in The Curse of Fatal Death, or maybe use inspiration off Paul McGann's Dark Eyes outfit, except including a black velvet trench coat. As for the stories, I feel like they would remain the same, although I can imagine him really giving his all with the Everybody Live speech in The Empty Child / The Doctor Dancers. And like before, the Doctor would consume the time vortex and regenerate. Now, usually in this case, I'd just make David Tennant the next Doctor here, but I, that being Naughty of course, decided to change things up a bit. For this incarnation, he would instead be played by Richard Coyle. Now, if you're not aware who Richard Coyle is, you might recall watching him as Dumbledore in the third Fantastic Beasts film, or in the chilling adventures of Sabrina. And seeing how his TV series coupling ended in 2003, I feel like the Doctor would have been a great breakout role for Coyle. I feel like his personality for 10 would actually be a fun-loving type, especially around Rose, but would have more of Nine's personality traits, namely his reservation and his coldness towards his enemies and almost everyone else, with only minor exceptions. After the events of Doomsday, the Doctor slowly begins to learn to become more accepting of others, sort of similar to the first Doctor's character arc, though still just as heavily affected by death, making him eventually snap and go full Time Lord victorious by the time of the specials. His outfit will be fairly similar to Tennant's blue outfit from Series 3 and 4, though likely with a few differences, like a more muted colour scheme. The stories for Coyle's Doctor would, much like with Grant, likely be the same as in our timeline, just slightly refitted to suit his Doctor. After the specials, I also believe that the timeline would then sync up with reality, giving us Matt Smith as the 11th Doctor, much like before, at least up to a point. Naturally, if David Tennant isn't the 14th Doctor in this timeline, that leaves the question of who would it be. However, I don't think it would have been Hugh Grant. His schedule in 2023 is busy, to say the least, meaning Richard Coyle would have come back, and that is a story for another day. Now, I did mention a second option for Hugh to become the Doctor. So, what is that then? Well, option 2, Hugh Grant is the 11th Doctor in Journey's End. Now, if you recall Bill's video on what if Matt Smith was in Journey's End, there was a second timeline in which Ian McKellen will become the 11th Doctor after being blasted by the Dalek. So this would be like the McKellen one, but this time it would be with Grant. Now, would he be more of the same like McKellen's Doctor? Well, no, I kind of see Hugh's Doctor still having his dark moments, but I do believe he'd be more of the saviour type than the dark and losing companions type. But I feel the same thing that happened to Donna in McKellen's timeline would still occur with Grant's Doctor. As for the specials, they'd all be the same, so The Next Doctor, Planet of the Dead, etc. But I do feel like if The End of Time starred Hugh Grant, it could have been promoted as a feature-length movie in cinemas. So that's about it for Notty's take on if Hugh Grant was the 9th Doctor. And if you really do like his work, please consider subscribing to his YouTube channel. He's got an upcoming Doctor Who America project in the works, which is said to be coming very soon, but Season 1 is already out, and he's working very hard on Season 2, along with other projects. If you want to know what my own take on this would be, as in me, Bill, I'll explain it very briefly. I would do a lot of what Notty did with his the same. Due to how busy Hugh Grant's schedule was in the 2000s, I also would probably have him stay for just the one series, or maybe 2 at the most. But then I would have David Morrissey succeed him as an alternate 10, so the 10th Doctor becomes a much darker and more tragic incarnation than what we got. And David Tennant is now the one to play Jackson Lake in The Next Doctor. But Morrissey does the same amount of time that Tennant did in our timeline, and regenerates into the 11th Doctor in The End of Time. Now, just to be a bit different, I'm going to continue having the new series Doctors played by different actors by having Chiwetel Ejiofor as 11, then Ben Daniels as 12, Olivia Colman as 13, maybe Jodie or someone else replaces her as the Queen for seasons 3 to 4 of The Crown, Morrissey then returns as 14, just like Tennant did, and then Lydia West becomes a female version of 15. But anyway, now for Reece's take on what if the 2005 revival had failed. The year is 2005, and Russell T Davies has revived Doctor Who after a 16-year hiatus, with an all-new series starring Chris Eccleston as the 9th Doctor and Billie Piper as Rose Tyler. Though Eccleston would leave after Season 1, the series was a huge success and has managed to continue going to this very day. But what if things were a bit different? What if, in an alternate timeline, Russell T Davies' series didn't get the popularity and ratings the BBC wanted? What if the 2005 revival had failed? Starting off, following the failure of the 1996 TV movie, Lorraine Heggessey, growing tired of BBC Films' attempts, went ahead and recommissioned Doctor Who as a TV show, though BBC Worldwide would not allow this to go forward, stating that they had the rights and how Doctor Who will be made into a movie. There was also confusion within the BBC over who owns the rights as well, if it was worldwide or if the rights were still with Universal, and if the BBC could actually make Doctor Who at all, with the main response the BBC had for its fans being that there were all sorts of legal problems with the rights. This actually kind of turned out to be true, and is why it took so long for Doctor Who to return as a TV show, with the BBC itself unsure on whether it was allowed to make Doctor Who at all. Lorraine Heggessey and the then BBC One controller Peter Salmon wanted to bring Doctor Who back in 2000 under the codename Doctor Who 2000. That's a really creative codename, isn't it? With Russell T Davies as the head writer. However, they were stunted by rights issues with BBC Worldwide, plus a lack of proper communication between BBC Worldwide, BBC Films, and BBC Television. Eventually, however, all the problems were sorted, and the production began on a new series to be released in 2005 with Russell T Davies as the showrunner. However, in 2004, Michael Grades returned to the BBC as a chairman. The new Director General, Mark Thompson, possibly mindful of Grades' antipathy towards Doctor Who, asked Lorraine Heggessey, who had by now become controller of BBC One, if they should hold off on production. Heggessey, however, would say that it was too late for that, as plans were already publicly announced and pre-production already underway. A U-turn and cancellation would receive huge major backlash from the public and would be a major waste of money. For this reason, they continued, and Doctor Who would return to the screen on the 26th of March 2005, with the first episode being entitled Rose. Series 1 would release, and despite the behind-the-scenes issues with Chris Eccleston, Russell T Davies, and the producers, resulting in Eccleston only staying on for the one season, it would still be a massive success, and the show would continue in our timeline. However, in this alternate timeline, things happen very differently. Series 1 would still have some pretty good episodes, such as Dalek and Parting of the Ways, but with the two-part story Aliens of London and World War III having some slight political messaging, would be something that Grade would seize on. He'd use this, combined with the messy behind-the-scenes problems, to cancel this new series, or rather, convince Mark Thompson that it needed to be canned, and so the show would indeed be cancelled yet again. The unmade episodes from our Timeline Series 2 would be turned into Big Finish audios as part of their Lost Stories range later down the line. Doctor Who would remain off the air for another 5 years until in 2010, the BBC would try again to make a new series of Doctor Who, this time as a full-on reboot. This would be made to be a little darker whilst keeping to the family-friendly aesthetic, balancing out the dark episodes with character-driven ones. Premise of this new show be that the Doctor was working for Gallifreyan Institute of Analysation, given a TARDIS and travelling with his daughter Lorraine to watch historic events on distant worlds throughout time and space, for the Time Lords to catalogue, although they are not supposed to interfere. However, the Doctor would break this non-interference policy and help out when he could. During adventures studying 21st century Earth, they accidentally pick up street painter James Stevenson, who'd accompany them on their adventures, as the Doctor tries to get him home. Meanwhile, James and Lorraine would form a slight bond to each other. The first season of the show will be given 12 episodes, reducing a number from the amount of the 2005 series, which had 13 episodes, with the format of the third episode being a historical, episodes 10, 6, and 7 being a mid-series two-part story. I think that's supposed to say with a format of the 3rd and 10th episodes being a historical, and then episodes 6 and 7 being a mid-series two-part story, and episodes 11 and 12 being a two-part finale. Each episode would be 45 minutes in length. Most of the stories they would do would be modernised retellings of classic Doctor Who episodes, such as the Daleks or the 10th Planet. Though with a much darker tone, they'd also do adaptations of Big Finish audios and the unmade episodes for RTD's Season 2 of our timeline, plus a few original stories to fill it out. To play the first Doctor, the BBC would hire Peter Capaldi. This new first series would release on the 26th of June 2010, the same date as Series 5 did in our timeline, with the first episode being a retelling of the Daleks and would end with a two-part retelling of the Dalek invasion of Earth. Of course, both would be much darker and updated for modern audiences, and end with a Christmas special. This new series would be met with a much higher number of ratings and go on to span 3 more seasons and 2 more Christmas specials. These seasons would introduce the Cybermen, the Sontarans, and the Autons, ending with Peter Capaldi leaving the show and regenerating into a new second Doctor at the end of Season 4. Season 2 would also introduce an extraterrestrial defense and response agency that fulfills the role of UNIT in this rebooted series. They get a spin-off which is similar to Torchwood from our timeline, and this series would also have an adaptation of The Chase and introduce the Master as well. Season 3 would introduce a new companion to join the team in the form of Cassandra, who is introduced in episode 3 and continues on for the next 2 seasons. This season would also show the departure of Lorene and James in the climax of their romantic side story. Season 4 would be released in 2013 and for that reason will be made a special series-long story based on the Daleks' master plan, and would see the Doctor regenerate into the second incarnation, played by Michael Sheen. Season 5 would see Cassandra depart following the mid-season 2-part story where they're fighting the Cybermen, due to her nearly being cyber-converted in what would be at that moment the darkest point in the series. This series would also have crossovers with the spin-off focusing on the Earth Defense Agency. Season 5 would also include an episode entitled Refuge, which introduces the character of Valea, a member of a species invaded by the Daleks. This episode would set up a Dalek spin-off entitled Dalek Conquest and would be the second spin-off. The first season of this spin-off would air shortly after the end of Season 5. The following Christmas special would introduce a character called Alina as a new companion, a thief who the Doctor must help get out of her habit. This sub-story would continue through Season 6 with her eventually managing to get out of her habit. Sheen would leave after the 7th season, not wanting to go on for the same length as his predecessor. He would regenerate at the end into the 3rd Doctor, played by Jonathan Groff, the first American to play the Doctor. This season would also include the first appearance of the Dalek Strategist Supreme, predating his debut in Dalek Conquest Season 3, coming after this series. It'd also be the first instance of the Dalek Crusader design replacing the original design. Season 8 would see the departure of Alina as a companion. It would also see the return of Valea, who learns the Doctor's identity and feels betrayed by him not saving her race. This leads into Season 4 of Dalek Conquest, where the Doctor makes a guest appearance to save the Aldurians and the Aldurian Union from the Daleks. It would end with Valea joining the Doctor as a companion, being the first companion to join the Doctor in a spin-off. Season 9 would follow the story of Valea having to learn Earth history, which she is very limited on, whilst continuing their usual adventures. Valea would continue to be the companion for Season 10 and onwards. And that is the end of Reece's take on what if the 2005 revival had failed. Now this series could go on forever, but we'd be here all day. If you want to know what my own take on this would be, as in me, Bill, I'd probably have someone like Mark Gatiss or Stephen Moffat at the helm for the darker 2010s reboot of the show. And I'd probably have them take inspiration from the Hinchcliffe era instead of Reece's ideas, although Reece's stuff is very good, don't get me wrong. So yeah, 2 very interesting scenarios there. I hope you enjoyed them. If you have any polite questions on stuff you'd like to be further explained, then please comment them below, and I will relay them to Nottie or Reece, or they might be able to reply themselves if they see them. And a very happy belated 20th anniversary to the new series. So, until next time, bye-bye.